A special shout out to NIO Switzerland for sharing this. China announces more short selling curbs to stabilize stocks. Now, for me, the way I see this, this is the China Securities Regulator, the CSRC. So this is for their jurisdiction over there. But the second paragraph here, I think kind of is important to note. Short selling involving the sale of borrowed shares is often blamed in China by regulators and investors for exacerbating market declines. But this is not a new thing. Here's what I mean. If we go back in time, Citadel Securities pays 97 million US dollars to settle with China regulators. This is back in 2015. And for a number of years, Citadel was not even allowed to trade in the Chinese markets. Now, they're talking about short selling back here as well. And they talk about some of the things that Citadel was doing. Now, Citadel is a market maker, so they get away with doing some things in the US market that they couldn't in other places. So it's really fascinating to see them get in trouble across different time zones and in different markets. But kind of the simplified way that I'm looking at this is, for example, right now I've got the fails to deliver pulled up on the screen. This is only the recent history for NIO. And the fails to deliver represented by the white lines, that's when shares could not be found or located that were owed. Someone paid for something that was not delivered. So it could have been fake, made up, created out of thin air, rehypothecated, whatever you want to call it, shares that were used to suppress or push down stock price. This is one of the issues. And as a market maker, Citadel kind of gets a pass, but they also have a short position in NIO and have for a few years. That's why I reference them as the suspicious short in NIO. But there's more to this because, again, this just shows the lagged, delayed data and only in the US market. That's what's on screen. And so what we can't see is what's going on in Europe. That's a separate market. And you say, well, NIO isn't traded in Europe. Actually, it is, even if it's not supposed to be. I dug around and found some stuff. And in fact, I also saw that Citadel is doing some trading over there. NIO, there are things called ETPs that have been created where you can do a leveraged up to a 3x negative short position, essentially, on NIO in the European markets. So this obviously is going to fall outside of the purview of either the China regulators or the US regulators. And so in my mind, there are essentially three different markets and timeframes where shorting can occur. So it can almost go on nonstop. And so you say, well, when does it stop? It's a fair question. I do think that ultimately profitability is really important, but I also think there is a correlation. I've talked about it, and I'll drop the links to videos that I've done in the past where I've talked about some of these IDE companies, innovative driven enterprise. These are companies that early on aren't really recognized, and it takes them a little while longer to get to profitability. However, once they get to profitability, they can really make a ton of money. Some of these companies, these IDEs, early on trade as penny stocks before they become incredibly profitable. Essentially, there's a short thesis in play until it's not. And once the company crushes the short thesis, that's when it would appear a lot of the stock prices take off. One reason NIO is really fascinating to me, and in respect to this is, and I'm just going to zoom out so we can look at the whole history of the fails to deliver. Because if we look at the whole history for NIO, what you see is there was a time frame where NIO stock ran. Now, NIO was not profitable at this point. They are not profitable yet as a company, and that remains a pivotal. In fact, it's my second major growth phase initially, like early on, for the company to become sort of a mature or be on its way to becoming a mature company as an IDE. That's also why I gave it a long-term time frame. I wanted to give this company time to build out. But early on, to have these fails to deliver spike, and then when they dropped off, the NIO stock price ran and acted like a meme stock. And I believe some investors, perhaps even institutional investors, consider NIO to be a meme stock. I think that makes things even more interesting moving forward. Once NIO shows profits, for example, what do we see? Do we see some kind of craziness like this? Do we see NIO, as institutional investors, maybe realize that this is a legitimate power company that is growing and emerging and is going to come out of China? That's where things are really kind of interesting for me, watching what others see and think, and even the narrative as it goes along, because it seems like so few are truly understanding that this company is a unicorn, or maybe because they don't recognize it for how unique and the global footprint that it can have potentially. Maybe that's one of the reasons some are so negative on it. But anyway, that's a little of the psychology behind. But as far as I'm thinking and looking at things, I just wonder, do we see another massive run with the stock? Do we see it, eventually start As the short thesis, let's say, gets crushed, do we see it, the stock price start recovering and moving back up in a more healthy manner? I almost, and I got to be honest here, I almost am more excited and think that the longer we have this long period of consolidation, the longer it goes, I do think we could have a bigger move. Maybe, probably not. I'm not expecting anything that was Tesla-like. There were a couple of other conditions that I think helped Tesla, but there are a couple of similarities. Tesla was another IDE, and they were heavily shorted until they became profitable. So I do think that's of note and something to kind of keep an eye on, excuse me. There's one more thing I want to share, and this is, full disclosure, this is what the comment section in my video from yesterday looked like. I've gotten a lot of these people talking about dilution, NIO diluting. Here's how I responded to almost all of them, because I just want to, I want people to do some basic level research. And if someone wants to act like an attorney, even if it's like a serial clickbaiter on YouTube who wants to act like they're a financial advisor or an attorney, I want them to offer something a little more tangible. I don't want to have to break down and do research on things like this. So I just did the question mark to see who is kind of buying into this narrative or whatnot, or who really is even looking at, for example, what NIO has filed, and the verbiage, the legalese, all that stuff. It matters, at least in my mind. But anyway, that's a little my take, a little tangent, and I think I almost feel like I want to distance myself a little bit more from some of the NIO YouTube content creators, or maybe I just need to look at everything with fresh eyes and find some new channels to kind of check into and see what they're talking about. I'm not sure. And that's kind of a one-off. But again, because now it affects me in the comment sections, I just don't want to spend a bunch of time breaking things down that people can look up for themselves. And the narrative is that. Part of it is the short thesis. Part of that is the shorts that I see consistently popping up in, well, they used to pop up in my comment section more because I've removed a lot of them. And ironically, that's not hurting my channel because my channel is actually growing, even though I'm not doing a ton of content. So anyway, just some randomness there to finish this video off. But I want to hear from others on this. Are you aware of things like the European market having some ways that, and I've seen people talk about it on Twixter before, and they were sort of like, wait, what is this? And they showed the negative 3x leverage, essentially a triple short position leverage that can be taken against NIO. And again, this is a market where it's not even supposed to be traded. Interestingly enough, and perhaps related, is I believe Wes Christian, the superstar attorney, who has, I don't think shorts have ever actually gone to trial against him because they do not want to see him in trial. And probably they would have to share things in discovery that they don't want out there so that the public can't be made aware of it all. But in any event, he talked about how there are some countries in Europe where naked shorting is legal. It is allowed. And so perhaps there's a jurisdiction where this, triple negative leverage shorting has been set up because they know they can get away with it. There are no regulators who are going to do anything because it's not even illegal. It's wild. It's bizarre. And you can really get lost down rabbit holes digging into some of this, which is why I shared a little more of it for channel members. But eventually I'll share that video with everyone. Just haven't decided when or how soon. Again, for me, it just remains the same theme. Research, study. Emotion is the enemy of an investor, but I believe research is the friend of an investor. So that's my take. Anyway, drop it in the comments. Thanks for stopping by. Have a great day. I'll see you all again very soon.